The MVP award is one of those awards that everyone has an opinion on, and year in, year out, without fail, the criteria changes. The way that people judge the award changes, the way it's given out changes, the way that people take away from certain candidates changes. It really is dependent year over year on what will happen. And I want to take a look today at Luka Doncic's specific case mostly, but I'm also going to touch a little bit on the rest of the candidates and why Luka is seemingly falling out for some people and seemingly accelerating to the front of the pack for others. So right now, the MVP is, in my opinion, a four horse race. Right, there's Jokic, Shea, Giannis, and Luka. Some people are pushing for Tatum. I don't see him as an MVP level player this season. A lot of people don't, and he's also the fifth place in most polls. He's the fifth place in the Basketball Reference MVP award tracker. That has historically been fairly accurate, and is also not the level of player that the other four have been this season. So I just want to take a look at first the Basketball Reference MVP tracker. So right now, the top four are the same four that I listed earlier, with Nikola Jokic being head and shoulders above the rest of the pack at a 44.4% probability. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander being second, nearly with 17%, narrowly above Giannis with 16%, and then Luka has 10.9%. This is a tracker that Basketball Reference puts out that tries to predict who will win MVP. And currently, each of these players are well on track to qualify with the 65 games rule. If it weren't for the 65 games played rule, we would still maybe be talking about Embiid qualifying for this award. However, that kind of gets messy because he has missed so much of the season at this point that it's not like he's played 60 games and didn't qualify. He's likely going to miss a significant chunk of the rest of the season, if not the rest of the season outright. But if it was Embiid and he was healthy, he'd be taking the award by a mile right now. However, right now, the four MVP candidates are all averaging historic seasons with unprecedented efficiency for some of them, with unprecedented stat lines for nearly all of them, and they are all in kind of a league of their own as far as who the four best players have been this season, I think. You can bring up Steph, you can bring up Embiid, as the other like two to round out the top six, but I think those six are soundly the top six in the league. So you have Jokic, who is currently the 3 seed in the West, and he's a game behind the Timberwolves, half a game behind the Thunder. He is currently averaging 26, 12, and 9 on 58, 35, 82 splits. That is a very efficient season, not a stat line we have seen before, and he is only really matched by his own production in NBA history for these sorts of things, this sort of efficiency, this sort of assists numbers, these sort of rebounding numbers, and this sort of scoring output. He has had a very good season. The Nuggets are in the fray for the top seed. They are putting on the accelerator. After the All-Star break, they were on a bit of a slog going into it, but they are 6-1 since, only losing last night to the Phoenix Suns in overtime in a game where Jokic was frankly awful. That is one of the worst Jokic games I've seen in a long time. But he's allowed to put up a few stinkers, and the candidacy for him is basically, hey, he's been the best player in the league over the past few seasons. He's coming off of a Finals MVP, coming off of a championship. He's keeping up his production, and his team is doing really well. And this is including the fact that Jamal Murray has missed several games this season, to the point where he's been without a second option for a good chunk of the season, and the Nuggets are still only a game back from the 1 seed. And given the way that they're playing right now, given the way that the Thunder are playing, given the way that the Timberwolves are playing, there's a solid chance that the Nuggets end up being the 1 seed this season. And if they are the 1 seed, the logic behind that is best player on the best team, and also reigning championship, reigning Finals MVP. they did the thing again, and they are looking like the favorites. That would be the logic behind his MVP case. And then we have Shea, who you can say a lot of the same stuff about Jokic as Shea. He's been a little more, he burst onto the scene a little more this season. Jokic has kind of been here, done that. But he also was, I think, 4th or 5th in MVP voting last season. So it's not like he's not been good. He's been very good for a couple of seasons now. This is his best season by far. He's averaging 31 points, 5.5 rebounds, 6.5 assists on 54.6, 38.3, and 88.2 splits. He has led a very inexperienced team to be the 2nd seed in the West right now. They're 42-19. They're half a game above the Nuggets and half a game behind the Timberwolves. And they are a good team, but they would not be close to the team they are without Shea, which you can say about Jokic, you can say about any player I bring up in this video, you can say that about their team. But specifically with Shea, he has been the driving force behind the newest contender of the season, really. And he's been largely impressive. He's doing things that have not really been done before by someone this young, by someone in this sort of situation. He's only 25. Luka's only 25. So, the NBA has its league in good hands. Then you have Giannis, who is averaging the most efficient 30-point per game season we've seen since Wilt, I believe, or since Shaq, one of the two. He's been very Shaq-esque this season. He's averaging 31 points, 11 rebounds, 6.5 assists, basically, on 62% shooting from the field. That is absurd. That is ridiculous. He is sometimes put by people as like the third person behind Jokic and Shea, being 1A and 1B, and then you have Giannis, and then you have Luka. He deserves to be in the 1C, 1B, 1A debate there. He is on a team that is second in the East, and by a fair distance back from the Celtics. They're not going to catch the Celtics. But also considering the Adrian Griffin, Doc Rivers debacle, considering the fact that Dame is fading like a lightning queen, considering the fact that a lot of shit has gone kind of sideways for the Bucks this season and they're still 41-21, that's impressive. And most of that is due to Giannis. He has been a great defender, as he always is. He has been a great offensive player, as he always is. And he's taken a big playmaking leap this season, too. I've seen some people say he's like as good as Jokic, which is not true. But like, if you're being realistic about it, he has been a fantastic playmaker this season and has taken a big leap in that area of his game. So, you have those three, and those three are very classic MVP candidates where they are the best players on some of the best teams. And I think between Jokic and Shea, it's whoever ends up in the standings higher that will be the best candidate from the West, and Giannis will be the best candidate from the East. But then you have Luka. Luka Doncic is 25. He is someone who has been in the league for a solid amount of time now, but this is his best season to date, and he is doing absurd things. He is averaging 35 points, 9 rebounds, and 9.8 assists will round up to 10. 10 assists a game. And he's doing this on 50, 38, 78.5 splits. And that is an absurd stat line. That is the most points, assists, and like rebound totals that we've seen in a long time. No one has averaged these stats. This is not a normal stat line. Like, the only stat lines I can think that kind of compare to it are like Harden and Houston. But even then, this is better in my opinion. And I mean, even in Houston, Harden was an MVP. So the thing with Luka is like he's maybe having the best individual season of any of these players. Not that he's better than all these players, but he might be having the best individual season. The issue there is the team success, because the Mavericks are 34-28. They have lost 6 of their last 7, I believe, and they are currently the 8 seed in the West. They are half a game above the 9 seed and only a game above the 10 seed. With their recent form, they might very easily fall to be a 10 seed, in the next couple of weeks. And that makes it tough for Luka to win, because we've seen players win MVP as the 6th seed with Jokic, and I think as the 8th seed with Russ, if I'm remembering the seeding correctly there. It might have been the 7th seed, but I think it was the 8th seed. But those seasons we didn't have candidates as good as the ones we have right now, I don't think. Jokic was someone who was dealing with a lot of injuries, who was dealing with an unhealthy roster, and put up unprecedented stats. Luka has not had injuries this season. He is dealing with, things like a stacked Western Conference, and Jokic was in a good Western Conference, but not as good as this one. But then again, it's tough when you have candidates with as good a cases as Jokic, as Shea, as Giannis, when you're an 8 seed. Sure, you had Harden that year, but like Russ, that was the first time we saw a triple-double since Oscar Robertson. That was an insane season. As someone who watched that season and watched him put my team out of the playoffs, he was ridiculous that season. There is nothing that can be said to change my mind about the fact that that was an absurd season. And then Jokic is much of the same of like, yeah, he was the 6th seed, but it was a fairly close 6th seed, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. And also, he was just the best player that season. And Giannis had a case for sure, but also was not as good as Jokic that season, and there was voter fatigue with Giannis potentially getting his 3rd straight MVP. So, with that being said, the Luka thing is where the goalposts start to shift from year to year. And the MVP narrative gets real screwy because you have a guy who is averaging 35, 9, and 10 on good efficiency, and he is single-handedly making his team a playoff team in a Western Conference that is just absurd. Like, they've won 55% of their games, and they're the 8 seed. They're almost the 10 seed. In the East, that is not the case. Like, they'd be around, with that win percentage, they'd be around the 8 seed, but you have to keep in mind, they are facing tougher teams. They are facing tougher opponents in the West than the East. If they were in the East, they'd probably have a better record. So it's tough when, you're trying to hand out the MVP to the most valuable player. Because all of these players are valuable to their teams. Without Jokic, the Nuggets might not be a playoff team. Without Luka, the Mavericks certainly are not a playoff team. Without Shea, the Thunder are probably not a playoff team. Without Giannis, the Bucks might be a playoff team, but that's mainly because they're in the East, and they would still have Dame. They would have to clear the Hawks basically, and that's a little different than having to clear the Warriors, the Lakers, those teams. Even though they're not as good as they used to be, they are still better than the Hawks. So, trying to hand out the most valuable player is a tough one, especially in something this contested. Because if it used to be the best player on the best team wins, but that hasn't been the precedent for some time now, since the Russ MVP basically. Because you had it go to Russ, then you had to go to Harden, I think, then you had to go to Giannis twice, then you had to go to Jokic twice, and now we've had to go to Embiid. Most of those players were not the best players on the best team. They were the best player in the league that season probably, but also not on the best team. I don't think the Embiid MVP was deserved. I do think that should have gone to Jokic, but that was a tight race. This is a tight race. I think you can make the argument whoever wins this was not super deserving, but was the wrong person. Then you start looking at on-off differential, and it kind of becomes clear to me what the top 3 should be. Jokic on-off. Denver is 23.3%, 23.3 points better with him on the floor than off per clean glass. These are all going to be per clean glass. So 23.3%, not percent, 23.3 point differential. Shea, plus 11.7. Giannis, plus 12.7. Luka is plus 7.7, which is still very good, but is not double digits like the others. Jokic is more than double the next closest to him, or almost double, not quite. So I think that kind of draws the thing that most people that are pushing for Luka don't want to say, and that for most people not pushing for Luka don't want to say, because Luka has been incredible this season. He should be All NBA first team. He's probably going to be All NBA first team, and deserves votes for the MVP. Like, this is not a unanimous MVP situation. This is not a case where there should be a clear-cut MVP. But looking at the advanced stats, looking at, the team records, the MVP has a problem where it's not necessarily the best player that season, because I think Luka might be having the best season of these players. I don't think he's the best player of these four, but the best individual season, I think, is Luka. But I don't think he's in the top three. So I think that the NBA should make a best player and a most valuable player. And some people have talked about this in the past. And I think that it's important that we document these seasons, because we don't want to forget this Luka Doncic season. If Shea wins the MVP, we don't want to forget these Jokic and Giannis seasons. Same thing if Jokic wins it. Don't want to forget the Shea season. We need to do a better job as a fan base of documenting these incredible seasons. Because when you look back, only one person is going to pop up as the MVP. But so many players this season are capable of winning it and deserving of winning it. This is a special, special era for the NBA. And this is not a situation we should take for granted. We are living in the most talented era in NBA history. The era where there are the most good players in NBA history. Like, if you took Luka Doncic and dropped him in the 80s, that dude is better than Michael Jordan. If you take Giannis and drop him in the 80s, that dude is better than Shaq. If you take Jokic, so on and so forth. These guys are insane, These guys are insanely talented, and, I'm going to take back that Luka thing. I don't think he's better than Jordan. But point stands that, like, he would be the second best player in the league behind Jordan. Any of these guys would be. If you dropped them in the 2000s, they would maybe be the best player in the league. This is an insanely talented era, and we as fans should do a better job of celebrating the players instead of trying to tear them down. We should celebrate Luka Doncic dropping 35, 9, and 10 instead of being like, but this guy isn't too fast. He's not too athletic. Oh, but Shea deserves it. Jokic deserves it over him. We should appreciate all these guys. Go to bat for your guys. I'm not saying don't say, hey, Jokic should win MVP. Hey, Shea should win MVP. Giannis should win MVP. But also, take time to smell the roses. Take time to really absorb what's happening in the league, because we're not going to be able to love these players forever and watch them play forever. And while they're playing, we should celebrate the talents that are in the league. So, yeah, thank you guys for the support lately. Peyton Watson video did insanely well, and I really appreciate the support on that video specifically. It is more than double my most viewed video, and that was the first video I uploaded in 2.5 years. So I really appreciate all of you. Remember to leave a like, subscribe, comment. It really helps in the algorithm. And if there are any more videos you guys want to see from me, leave them in the comments below. Yeah, have a good rest of your day. Check out some of my friends. They do a podcast called The Shoot Around. Check that out. They'll be streaming later today. Or maybe they already did, but you can catch the VOD depending on when this goes up. But yeah, have a good one. Stay safe. Peace.